the story of my podcast has just been an evolution of me as an entrepreneur because I'd spent many years building businesses, which most people don't understand. I'd built e-commerce brands. I tried to build startups. I used to run raves. I used to run parties. I used to do a ton of stuff when I was younger, and they all went to zero. And they didn't go to zero because I had a lack of action. Went to zero because I had a lack of intelligence. And I was like, why am I doing something that I'm shit at? So I had to just continuously make things better. First it's the cable, then it's the camera, then it's the mic, then it's the room, then it's the backdrop, then it's the guests, then it's the questions. There's a continuation of things to the point that it was just all I thought about 24/7, all day, every single day. I would sleep about it, I'd wake up, I'd have nightmares about it. And all I would think about is making it better.
Welcome to the Ronin Mindset podcast. My name is Steve Didier, and this is the podcast for you if you are looking to escape that 9-to-5 grind, if you are looking to break free of corporate life, escape the matrix, and live life as a global citizen. This is where you're going to find out how to do exactly that. And today, we're going to talk podcasting. And my guest today is the perfect person to have on for that, having done... Oh man, the numbers are absolutely fantastic. Generated over 100 million views, over 10 million downloads, manages 50 podcasts, and coaches over 200 other podcasters, having helped them generate millions of dollars in revenue. Welcome to the show, Darren Lee.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the kind words. I'm super excited for this. Everything that you talk about in the podcast is exactly aligned to like even my own belief system and what I want to do and how I want to help other people too. So this is super well aligned. I think basically we both had not a similar background, but similar values around this too. So yeah, man, I'm happy to take this any direction and just rip on it for as long as you want.
Well, let's do it. You know, you are from Ireland originally and grew up in a small town. But much like me, grew up in a small town, I wanted out in the worst way. Not that it was bad, and I'm not knocking on that, but I wanted to get out and I wanted to see the world. And that corporate life on top of it was not something I would ever jump into. I did different jobs and things like that, and I knew that wasn't me. So I wanted a life that was more free. I wanted to travel the world. You were something very similar to that.
100%, man. And at the end of the day, people run from pain versus they run towards pleasure. So where I grew up in Ireland, people are comfortable. They don't really do much things. They're just pretty standard, right? And as a result of that, they're caught in a pleasure loop. They're going out, partying, doing X, Y, and Z, and caught in a very like mediocre level. Whereas for me, I was running from pain a lot of the time. I hated what I was doing. I didn't really like what I was doing in university. I didn't like the job I was doing. I wasn't making money. I was in debt. I'd taken on all the things you're meant to do as a good citizen. And it completely was all the things I didn't want to actually do in the end. So I had to run from the pain to even create my own vision of what pleasure looked like. And that's the problem with the path that I followed. And 100% honesty, I picked the path that was assigned to me, not that I wanted to do, because I didn't have my own path. So that unbundling of thoughts took many years, of course. And I'm 28 now. At 21, I was like super indoctrinated vibes. I was going through all like this traditional step by step by step. You know, I was only one step away from a white picket fence and a golden retriever, right? So the reason why it's so important to me is because I have seen that. I have done that. I have been in those jobs. I've got to the top of those like industries. And I can say from the bottom of my heart, I was the most unfulfilled I've ever been. And now as an entrepreneur, yes, it's tough. Yes, it's hard. Yes, I have payroll to hit, but it's not the same problems that I have. I don't have a freedom problem. I don't really have a money problem anymore. I don't have the same things that usually hold you down and give you the golden handcuffs to the point that you are so inhibited to be able to do anything you want in your life. And that's why for me in my mid-20s, it's been all about this. And I don't even get to talk about this that much on podcasts, to be honest, because it is very like lateral. We can talk podcasting all you want, but I think the lifestyle as well is something that, you know, is misunderstood. People think lifestyle is Rolexes and fake Lambos. Lifestyle for me is being able to do what I want with whoever I want, whenever I want. I'm based in Bali. I have a beautiful home. I have beautiful dogs. I have an amazing wife. That to me is freedom. And I have amazing team members that we work with, and I record with amazing people every single week. There is nothing more that I want. Everything else that I'm doing right now is just bonus points.
Yeah. When you mentioned the golden handcuffs, that really hit home because I had a real estate business in Las Vegas. And that's exactly what it was. I was making so much money, I couldn't leave, but I was not fulfilled. I was not happy. And I lost everything in the crash of '08. And for me, after I went through the, oh my God, woe is me crap, I realized that was probably a blessing in disguise, could allow me to get out. And when I left the US in 2013 and started living that kind of, whatever you want to call it, global citizen type life, I will never go back.
Let me ask you this. You were time poor versus money poor, correct?
Yeah, I had all sorts of money.
So was it a high level of stress, or was it a lack of time that you were seeking?
The stress was manageable. I like a certain kind of stress, the stress of building a business, the stress of, those good quality, healthy stresses. I enjoy that. I thrive on that, building something. What got me was the amount of hours I was putting in the week and just the inability to do things. If I wanted to leave and go to Europe for a month or something, like, there's no way I could do it. I leave, the business goes down. Because even though I did have a team, I had 18 agents at one point, my partner and I. So it was a good sized business. I couldn't leave. If I left, it fell apart.
That's such an interesting point, man. I think it's also the reality of running a business too, though. But there's a caveat here, which is like, you can go completely solopreneur. I think that leads to a high level of stress and a real high level of responsibility. Whereas if it's like lean, mean, actionable team, you can create a lifestyle whereby it operates for you. So I'll give you a personal example. When I first started doing tours for my podcast, the first one I did was in Dubai. And I remember I was just so fucking anxious because I knew I had uploads to do, clients to manage, content to put out, like loads of stuff to do within our business. However, when I did my latest US tour, which was 6 weeks, bear in mind, on the road, like every single day, like podcast, like flight, hotel, I was chilling because I have a COO, I have an operations manager, I have editors, I have designers, I have a whole suite of team, I have a head of coaching now as well. So what I mean is that, like, I enable these people and now my problems change. So you don't stop problems, right? It's just you get onto the next level of problems. So like my pain is payroll as a pain. And it's just like, whatever, it's just something that happens. But there's also a mechanism to resolve that. And I actually just wrote a tweet about this a minute ago, which is the highest level of leverage is being able to pay for your payroll on day one of the month because you make so much money on day one of the month. Like, that's just a high point of leverage, right? So what I just mean by all of this is that you can re-engineer anything. Like, you can just create your own world. Genuinely, like, I genuinely believe this. You can just create whatever scenario you want, and whether you think you're right or wrong, you're correct, right? Whatever you believe becomes true, 100%. If you're lazy, if you can't run that marathon, if you can't build that business, you're right. You fucking can't build that.
Right.
In the same vein, many people told me that I couldn't build an agency style business. It's not an agency, but an agent style business to 7 figures. We did it in a year. Many people told me we couldn't go from there. We've scaled up from there. So I just mean, like, a lot of this is anecdotal. And at the end of the day, you determine those stressors, you determine those different levers that you want to lean into and effectively, like, run your life from.
I agree 100%. And there are probably ways that I could have set myself up and structured myself differently in the real estate business, but ultimately I wasn't fulfilled.
Exactly.
Either way. And, that the real estate specifically, that was a tough one because you're geographically stuck in one place. And that was another thing. So, but, like I said, it was a blessing in disguise. It was tough at the time to lose everything, get wiped out, and all everything that you spent 10 to 13 years building. It's tough, but life happens for a reason, they say. And that is what I needed to get out of that and do what I'm truly passionate about. So, well, let's talk podcasting, especially as a vehicle for somebody to achieve this lifestyle, whether it's focusing on the podcast as a revenue generating mechanism or as a way to promote your existing business. You've got a podcast called Kickoff Sessions, and you started that in 2020?
Correct.
That is absolutely fantastic. I watched some of the episodes, particularly one you released recently with Brett. He was talking about YouTube.
That dude is dialed in.
Wow.
Dude, that's like the
you've had
best. That's like the best podcast on YouTube, I think. That's not to do with me. That's to do with Brett.
Well, the guy's fantastic, but I like your interview style. I like a lot of the things you bring to the table, but you also have got to the point where you can bring on some absolutely top-notch guests and everything. But let's back that up a little bit. When you started the podcast, was it as a standalone business, or were you doing it to support another business? And did you have it in your mind that you were going to be like, yeah, I'm going to be a top 1% global podcaster?
Absolutely not. I think the story of my podcast has just been an evolution of me as an entrepreneur, because I'd spent many years building businesses, which most people don't understand. I'd built e-commerce brands. I tried to build startups. I used to run raves. I used to run parties. I used to do a ton of stuff when I was younger, and they all went to zero. And they didn't go to zero because I had a lack of action. They went to zero because I had a lack of intelligence. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have the insights. I didn't have the wisdom. I didn't have the knowledge. So the logic was, instead of going again and failing, why not slow down, listen, learn, and acquire the knowledge I need to be able to build whatever I want again in the future? Because you only need to learn the lesson once to know that you don't need to want to repeat a bad lesson. So the podcast for me was an entire exploration to be able to learn exactly where my gaps are. So I started out interviewing just entrepreneurs broadly. Then I started interviewing people in like career space, because at the time I wanted to become CEO of Goldman Sachs. And then I discovered the online space, and I realized that people that were just like me were absolutely crushing it. They weren't that super talented. They were just normal. They just did it, and they just learned on the go. And I started to internalize a lot of that stuff and started to actually action it. So in the beginning, it was really about the process. And I'm like an absolute nerd when it comes to production, design, sound, elegance, all of this stuff, all those subtle nuances. I'm always really aware of, because I'm probably like super insecure about it. Like, I don't want to put something out that looks shit. I don't want something that goes out that sounds bad. It's just like my own like insecurity, like my own like wanting like self-acceptance, to the point that I just got like super anal over it, that people would come to me, guests, and say, hey, like, I love your podcast and I love the setup. Could you do this for me? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, whatever. I was working in finance. I was like, fair enough. I'll just help you out. Like, give you a bit of help here. And then they would say, okay, this is helpful, like the consulting element, but I don't have the team to execute it. I don't have the ideas to execute it. I don't know what to do. I don't know what a hook is, whatever. So that's when we kind of moved into like an agency style business, which is I did the reps. I showed people how it was done based on me. They would say, can I see a case study? I would open up YouTube and be like, here's your case study. Here's my channel. Here's exactly how I do it. I didn't need testimonials. I didn't need case studies. I was the case study. You are always the best case study for yourself, 100%. This is why you don't buy from a fat personal trainer or broke financial advisor. They have to be that for themselves before they can be it for anybody else, right? And at that point, we started helping other shows, seeing what we could do, started running production, started running editing, started running design, and it just grew. And it forced me to level up. I do tours, I go here, I go there, so that I understand what's happening. I understand what guests are actually looking for in questions. I understand what guests hate about podcasting, which is a lot. And I'm understanding like the level playing field. And that's when at that point, I had built up so many years of trust with my audience, with the market, with prospects, with clients, that my career in finance, I could just say goodbye to, because I was making more in a month from my podcast than I was making more in like a quarter from my good job in finance. Okay. To the point that I was only putting in maybe 20 hours a week into my podcast. That was running other people's shows as well, bear in mind at the time. So I was like, why don't I just go all in and just fuck like 80 hours, 100 hours into this and see what happens? And, you know, the rest is kind of history. So the philosophy is like, you always have to do it for yourself. And right now I'm currently building a studio in Bali. I'm building like a podcast studio in Bali. And one of my close friends was here the other day, and he was like, oh, like, can I rent it? Like, you know, is there any sort of like commercials we could do? Like, you know, are you going to get people to rent it? And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, bro, it's going to work because you're doing it for yourself first. Like, I'm building the studio for me. And then again, it's the same feedback loop, because it's going to be something that I am proud of. It is something that is sellable. It's commercial. So that's been the tale of my entire life. You know, that's how I got into running raves, because I was a rave kid. That's how I got into e-commerce, because I bought Rave clothes and I started selling Rave clothes to Rave kids. And then I started building travel apps. We can talk about that in a minute if you like. That went absolutely fucking belly up. But it was a logic that I was traveling so much and I had a ton of problems when I was traveling, just like stupid stuff, that maybe that was a product. So that's always been my philosophy. And if I ever think of the opposite, where I get put into a position, I was in trading, I shouldn't have been in trading. I was in finance, I shouldn't have been in finance. I was in consulting. Fuck no, I should not have been in consulting. I don't have the empathy for consulting, let's put it that way. And whenever I was in those verticals, so put a square peg in a circle hole, I was terrible. Yeah. Because they're not my skills. Whereas my skills, as you can probably tell, is just talking. Basically talking, marketing, sales, front end of the business, organization, and then hiring. I would say generally my biggest strength is actually hiring above everything else. So yeah, that's the philosophy, right? That's why it has to come intuitive. Like this has to be an internal pursuit for whatever you want externally.
I think a lot of people force themselves to do something that doesn't really align with their values or their 100%. Likes, dislikes, and they do it because of whatever, societal expectations or pressure from parents, whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. Was there a single turning point with kickoff sections where you realized like, hey, podcasting is my gig, is that's what I want to do? Was there or was just kind of that evolution over time?
The biggest opportunity and challenge for me was the fact that I felt I should have been good at it and I wasn't. So I was speaking, I was showing up, I was doing this stuff, and it was shit. I would look at it, it would look terrible, it would sound terrible, I sounded like a nerd, and I was like, why is this not working? And that internal frustration drives me more than anything else, running from pain. And I was like, why am I doing something that I'm shit at? So I had to just continuously make things better. First it's the cable, then it's the camera, then it's the mic, then it's the room, then it's the backdrop, then it's the guest, then it's the questions. There's a continuation of things to the point that it was just all I thought about 24/7, all day, every single day. I would sleep about it, I'd wake up, I'd have nightmares about it. And all I would think about is making it better. Nothing else. I don't have any other focus. I don't need to write down my goals. I just know exactly what I need to do 24/7, to the point that it was just like the only thing that was going in my brain. Like there's nothing else. Like I'd be driving my motorbike, it'd be in my brain, I'd be in the gym, I would be on a podcast thinking about a podcast. It would just be the one thing that I'm doing. And all the other tangential stuff that would come around, like getting the microphone, getting out the lights, whatever, everything feeds into the one mission. So then for me, the feedback loop was like episodes were clicking. I do not go for this like crazy views of like arbitrary people, 16-year-olds on Twitter approach. I'm very much focused on getting the right people to my podcast so that they can learn and that they actually want to like engage with me and be like a human, basically, not just like random people. So even though I've had episodes like really pop, they don't actually mean as much to me versus when you said, I listened to the Brett podcast, that was super helpful. And now I can go and action it as someone who is 25 episodes into their podcast, right? Because that to me is impact. Because like I've never tried to become famous. I'm trying to become influential, which is different. That's having a lot of authority in a very single, narrow vertical that when you think of podcasting, you just think of Darren Lee. And that's not like an egotistical thing. It's just niche thing. It's just dominating a niche. The best way to describe it is if you open up your girlfriend's phone on Instagram, you will see a totally different feed than if you open up your feed. And if you 100%. Looked at your feed, you would be like, oh, like, you know this guy, this business guy? And she'd be like, no, of course not. Because we tell ourselves stories of what's important and what's not. So to me, these things are super important, this on my feed, whereas to her, this is a completely different thing that she doesn't obviously give a shit about your feed, right? No diss to you. But the logic in there, the rationale there is the fact that they are authorities in a very narrow vertical. And that to me is what wanted me to get better. Was because I could quickly realize like nearly half a decade ago that the game isn't won in becoming famous. The biggest accounts you see are all broke as fuck, right? They're all broke. Yeah. They all fucking come to me to try to figure out their business, to be honest. And their revenue per follower is hilarious. It's trash, right? Whereas honestly, I think per 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, you should be making $1,000 more, because that's how I did it. From the bottom of my heart, as I was going up and we were like stuck at like 5K, I had a very, all over business. Then we got to 10K, we got to 40K, we got to 50K. And it became more of a repeatable process because you are the craft. Do you get me? You become the craft. And yeah, we've had stages of consolidation and ups and downs and all this kind of stuff. But my logic is, if you dial in your strategy, if you dial in the growth mechanism, all of this shit should flow in a consistent pattern. I won't mention the guy's name, but I'll share it with you afterwards. It was a very famous podcaster. I put up a tweet yesterday and I sent it into my internal or private community. And the guy was saying that, he was told to build a huge YouTube account and then monetize afterwards. He was told to build a huge podcast and monetize afterwards. And he did both things and no one even bought his shit afterwards. He had this huge account and no one bought it. And he did it twice. He did the fucking problem twice. And I threw it into our community being like, this is without a doubt like the worst advice I've ever seen in my entire life. And he had said like, oh, look, I've changed it and whatever. But I mean, you can monetize from day one. From literally day one. Because let's think about it, right? Let's say you help people with global citizenship. You already have the offer in your head. You already know how to help people. You can do consulting like this. It's not even a fucking product. It's an offer. From second one of your first video, you can start consulting and coaching people. And then you can add in bells and whistles and all this kind of shit. And But that's the philosophy you have to be thinking through. That's the philosophy I've been thinking through not from the very beginning, but from pretty early on. And then when I started getting the inbound requests from people, I was like, look, this is it. Like, it's very simple. You just run content on the front end, and on the back end, then you have a simple offer for people to buy. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. And that, when I first started podcasting, I was just doing very general, kind of like you. This is a very general, and it was something that I just really loved. And I had my credit business and I was, whatever. It was like something I was just doing because I loved it. But then after, X amount of episodes, I was like, you know what? I took a little bit of a hiatus and I really reimagined it because I'm like, I have to put a business model behind this. So I really niched down on who I was talking to. I looked at my own, because I'm the same thing. You've got to be your own blueprint. It's like the 20-year-old life coach doesn't really have much to offer me, So I was like, okay, I know exactly who I want to talk to, which led me to exactly the type of guest that I want to bring on. But it also all ties in with the products that I'm developing right now. I'm 25 or so episodes in, but I've already got the products in my mind. Now I'm getting them fleshed out. I'm going to set them up. I'm looking to monetize immediately.
Of course. And that's the first thing I said to you. Remember we chatted on, I remember we chatted on LinkedIn. The first question I asked people was like, how are you going to make money? And then they're like, oh, I'm going to do this. And I'm like, we'll just do it now. Because there's nothing you need to wait for. Do you get me? You need to refine and get better, of course. And there's like a funnel and there's this and there's that. But technically, if someone listens to your video, they're an engaged person. And that engaged person will vibe with you, they'll like you. And the offer, reason why the word is offer is because like you are offering something to someone who already is interested in what you're doing. It's not kicking them through a funnel. It's not trying to push them over the line. It's not giving some like spammy like CTAs. It's just a natural progression. So if I knew I could help you with global citizenship, credit, real estate, whatever, it would be an injustice if I didn't say, hey bro, like I know this is taking you like 4 years to do. I could probably do it for you in like 4 hours. That's like an injustice. And like that's what like a friend does, right? In general. Yeah. So I think that's why it's an interesting observation, right? Because I think like that's what I'm really trying to change in the content world. And I just have the receipts from it. We've just been doing it for a few years. There's nothing special. And what I often find too is you'll find this quite interesting. So like we work with some very large businesses, some enterprises, but I mean just like large online businesses. And at the end of the day, the largest businesses are the simplest in terms of execution. They just have content, offer, lead magnet, like literally the most basic shit ever. Because what I've observed is the guys that are the most broke have the most complex process. And I wouldn't even call it a system because it just doesn't work, it just often doesn't work. And like people often say to me, they're like, there has to be more to it than content and like a landing page. And I'm like, why do you want more to it? Like that's my answer. You look at someone like Justin Welsh. He's like, content on LinkedIn, website, buy stuff on the website. Like it's fucking literally anybody could do it. And that's why it's simple, but not easy. And that's the thing, is the fact that the knowledge that someone like Justin Welsh has acquired has taken him decades to learn. So his simple offer to teach you how to build a online business looks straightforward and anybody could do it, but you pay for the pain that he actually went through. And that's why even when you buy something or you consume something, it's simple. Like we want it to be simple. And that's the beauty of it, man. Like I think there's a lot of people just kind of overcomplicate this shit. And I just don't think it's that complicated. That's the honest truth.
Well, people think it has to be complicated to work. And really the opposite is true. I think that the simpler, it's the old adage, keep it simple, stupid. Like,
yeah, 100%.
That's it.
100%.
And
right?
it does, like you said, you do have to have the receipts. You do have to have that knowledge and that experience, and you have to bring something of value to the table. Mm-hmm. But after that, keep it simple.
Well, also, what happens in the back end of a business happens in the back end. That's not what's exposed to a customer, and it's definitely not what is exposed on your podcast to get people to buy your shit. So Steve Jobs stepped up and said 1,000 phones. Steve Jobs stepped up and said 1,000 songs in your pocket. He didn't say 256 gigabytes and a 4-inch screen and it's going to have a RAM of this pace, because the consumer doesn't need to know that and it will never be exposed to that. So that's why we need to keep it simple for the user so that they can flow naturally through it. And then as a result of buying the iPod, you buy earphones, you buy the iPhone, you move up through that ascension model, and it's a very natural ascension for anyone. So that's kind of how I compress everything down, because like at the end of the day, I just make it easy for podcasts to grow. And then like all the bells and whistles and shit that comes with it's just something that just happens. It's just like, this is what happens. So people only buy the outcome. And I think like that's where the online space just kind of makes things a little bit kind of complicated, and it's just overdone and all this kind of shit, right? Because you see someone like Jasmine Alec, he only posts like twice a week on LinkedIn. He's booked out on Calendly for like 4 months or some shit for his consultations. He doesn't want to do crazy scale. He does one-to-one consultations, which he just likes doing. And he's living in Bosnia, chilling with his son, and he's crushing it. And Bosnia is a beautiful place, low cost of living, so he's happy out, right? So I think, if you look at the biggest guys in our space, Jasmine Alec, Justin Welsh, Matt Gray, they just run content on the front end, which shows their authority, shares insights, gives people wisdom, opens the loop that this guy could potentially solve my problem, and then have a simple mechanism to get people from LinkedIn or whatever platform onto their product page, which gives them an overview of the benefits and has a simple CTA to buy the thing. Yeah. And I just got off a call with like a great friend and great client of mine, and we were like, we need to make fucking multiple landing pages for this. And I was like, at the end of the day, we don't. We don't. What we need is just something simple, something to buy it, and that's kind of what goes on. And I say this as someone who's done like a lot of good numbers in this space, to say that like this is actually the way to the easiest way to do it sometimes can be the most straightforward, right? And I think that's what's interesting here. I'm not giving some like random 2 cents. Like this is actually like how we get people to buy stuff, basically. Yeah. Personally.
Well, it's Occam's razor, right? Straightest line between 2 100%. Points. Yep. So with the podcasting, what are some mistakes? Like if somebody is aspiring podcast and they're setting up, I know the mistakes I made, but what are some very common mistakes that people make when they're getting into podcasting that you commonly see that they need to avoid?
So it's a great question. And the reality is most people don't have a content system for them to follow in the very beginning. So they have no idea about their overarching themes. So I call these content pillars effectively. So I position things into 3 buckets: your personal experiences, your tools, tactics, and your how-to guides. So if I'm teaching people how to podcast, I have my own personal experiences. I started with a $60 microphone. It sucked. I spent many years doing it. I have a lot of stories that are within here. and people buy the story, not the product. So that's over here.
Right.
Then I have frameworks, tools, tactics that people can implement. It's my process for outreach, my process for execution, my process for running episodes. When I share that, that builds my authority. People realize that this guy isn't just like a random storyteller. He actually knows how to help people. And then how-to guides then is actual frameworks that people can go and action. So that can be something very simple. It can be done in a roundabout way too, but it helps people solve a very specific problem in a very specific way. And sequencing is very important for problem solving in general, because you don't want to solve like a random like step 6 when you're at step 1. Okay. So that's the kind of philosophy you need to build. And if you're running a podcast with guests specifically, you need to find those guests who solve those problems. So if I teach people how to build landing pages, I say that's my podcast. You better wish you're getting people that build landing pages, the guys that work at Webflow, Shopify, all these people who have a really, really good approach. They all work in UX design, they work in customer interaction, they have a ton of experience in that. And you want to get founders who crush it with their landing pages, people that have made like 10 million plus on ClickFunnels, all these different people, because they're the people who have authority, influence, experience that you can leverage. And then as a result of that, by association of being with people that are actually recognizable and that solve the specific problem that you want to solve or you're in the pursuit of solving, you get recognized as that person. It's just an element of social proof. You are relatable, you have likeness, you're social proof, you have influence in that small little niche, and that's all that matters. So take the journey of myself. When I went kind of all in on the online business space, which meant kind of leaving out some of the other shit that I kind of talk about sometimes, like fitness, relationships, travel, I just interviewed a lot of people who were in different verticals within the content space. So people like Luke Belmar, who crushed it, Justin Waller crushed it, who else? Brett crushed it, people like Dickie have crushed it, Matt Gray. They don't do podcasting, but they're kind of in the content space. So it's kind of the same shit, right? If you wanted to be laser focused, you could just do, like for me in my instance, podcasting. But if I just did that, I wouldn't have done 250 episodes. So there's a trade-off there for sure, right? So that's my philosophy around it, to be honest. So I think like that's where it keeps it interesting, keeps it fun. And the beauty of doing this is that when you set a very clear strategy for your podcast, you only do it once because you intuitively know what's my storytelling points, what are my hooks, what are my key elements, what are my zone of genius, what can I do this forever with? You know what your big overarching themes are, that every single episode is a new rep. You're like a comedian going into a dive bar. You're dropping one-liners. You know what's hitting. You know what's not hitting. You're getting rid of the shit that you don't need. You're pulling in stuff that you do need. And that's what builds zone of genius. That's what makes you like a real authority figure in a very narrow vertical. And this is what people buy from. And this is what people buy into, right? There's only one dumb Irish guy who flies around the world interviewing people on their podcast. There's literally only one of them. Because no one else fucking has the time to do it. They're doing regular shit, right? Whereas I just literally get fly places and interview people. I'm like, all right, and I fly back home because I have nothing else to do. And I think that level of like personality is missing in personalities. You know, everyone's trying to be like Chris Williamson. No one's trying to be like themselves. And that's the reality of this space, right? Is like if you just be yourself and not be a potato, you already are in the top 1% of whatever imaginary like metric you want to measure. And that's the reality, is because people don't buy into you because you sound like Chris Williamson. They buy into you because you are just you. And that's the big difference here. That is the unique angle that most people are not willing to go to, because most people are not willing to sit with themselves and be like, this is who I actually am. Like, this is who I actually want to resonate with. This is what I believe. This is what I don't believe. And bro, you can believe whatever the fuck you want to believe, and you will find the right people. You'll attract the right people. And that's the beauty of it. That is the beauty of this game.
Your vibe will attract your tribe, right?
100%, man. And that's why we get on, right? Like literally, we instantly just got on. I was like, yeah, we have similar interests. Let's hang out. That's basically what happened.
Exactly. Yeah, we chatted. Because I found that article that you wrote on LinkedIn. It was absolutely fascinating for me, especially since it was about most people never make it past 3 podcasts, like 90%. Yeah. And then of those that make it past 3, I think only 10% get to 21. 100%. I believe it was the numbers. And I saw a tweet from, do you know Harry Stebbings?
Yes, I do. I've been messaging him for a long time trying to get him on my podcast and shit.
He did a tweet, and I know it. I love the concept of the tweet because it talks about, being consistent and playing the long game with podcasting. Because he said he didn't make $1 for like 350 episodes, something like that,
Mm,
and
mm.
it took him 52 emails and phone calls to get his first guest, and he went through all these stats. I'm gonna have to find the tweet, but I was kind of like you. I'm like, you don't need to have 350 episodes to maybe in venture capitalism is a different thing, but you can make money off a podcast. You don't have to have a huge audience. Like you said, you have to speak to your niche in an authentic way and connect with them and solve a problem that they have.
Mm. And I think the reality of this is that people misunderstand what monetization for a podcast is, because they think it's sponsorships by AG1 and then you're like shaking and let a greens bottle around like the screen. Whereas like that's
Yeah.
actually not the reality. If you're playing like a fool's game, which is like how big of a sponsorship can I get? You need to have the biggest podcast possible, because you are
Yeah.
not competing with like fucking Nancy's Bakery down the road. You're competing with Chris Williamson, Rich Roll, Jay Shetty, and it's a different game. Like you are literally playing
Yeah.
a different game. Whereas
Yeah.
if you are in a very narrow niche and you really dominate a very specific niche, like landing pages for e-commerce brands, that is a fucking super narrow niche that Shopify
Yeah.
would love to sponsor, man. They would love to be all over on top of that. And they would drop a lot of money on a sponsorship like that. So would
Yeah.
softwares to optimize conversion. So would companies, to be honest, that have products that are in that space. There's so many reasons why that they would want to be involved in that. And that's the beauty of this game. So the reason why you can just immediately turn that on is because if you're someone who builds landing pages, you can be the person who builds a landing page in the back and you can sell that straight away. So you could have consulting, coaching, agency, you could have programs, you could have whatever, because you're playing your own game. And to be honest, like I've ran the numbers on this, like you'll make more money, number one. It will be more predictable and it will feed much more of like what you want in your lifestyle. And the reason why I'm saying this is because we probably do anywhere between 50 and 75K a month on sponsorships. But dude, it's fucking wild. Like it goes up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. And that's not for me, that's for our portfolio, by the way. So we have a portfolio of like 100 podcasts. We take in the ad revenue and then I split it. So someone who does this is telling you that it's a really, really hard business to do, because I had a call with a very big software company who do this programmatically last night. And like him as the founder, me as the buyer in some regard, the seller, we still like, we're both like, this is just Wild West. There's no real metrics around this. It's very intuitive. I'm even running a coaching session in a program tomorrow on sponsorships. And the questions are all the same. How do I give the value? How do I determine the price? How do I do all this different stuff? And I think it's just interesting because it's just it's like the quick money, right? It's no fulfillment, quick money. Whereas like the reality is, if you want to build something more sustainable, you have a fucking offer on the back end that continuously runs, And if your content is dialed in, that means you have podcast market fit. And if you have podcast market fit, it means you'll have product market fit, whatever you want to build. So it's way more important to just align the content, get that dialed in to the point that you can run whatever offer you want. And technically at that point, anyone can buy it because you know who your targeting is, you know who your customer is, you know how to get them, you know where the access point is. And it's just like running any business. It's just the fact that we focus on podcasting because I feel like the whole world is just fucking automated, right? I feel like that everything is a Zapier flow and some random like 7-step program thing from some chatbot that clearly doesn't work, and you type live agent in and it still doesn't work and type in live agent. Whereas podcasting is completely counter to this. It's natural, organic. We see each other. We build the 7 hours of reciprocity across the chasm to buy a product. And that's been the entire philosophy of me. It's how it's worked for me. It's how it's worked for so many other people. So chances are it's going to work for someone else too. And I think we're getting in an era whereby it's getting even faster. That this demand for human interaction is just getting more and more and more. So you're perfectly well positioned 25 episodes in.
Yeah, listening to you, what you're saying makes absolute sense to me. And it kind of validates what my thought was when I took that hiatus and I was looking at, okay, I'm going to create a business out of this because I love doing this. The thought of sponsors, of course, I was like, okay, well, sponsors. And I was like, I just discarded it immediately. I'm like, the sponsor's not something I'm interested in. I'm not interested in becoming famous. My interest is in doing something I love, giving me the lifestyle that I want, helping people like who are in my tribe, that I like talking to and I enjoy helping. I have similar values and goals and outcomes. And when you look at the landscape of people in the US, Canada, the UK, Europe, there's a lot of people who want to get out. A lot of people.
Everyone. They just don't admit it. Just don't admit it, bro. You know what I mean?
Well,
they're programmed into thinking that they do. That's literally it.
Yeah. Well, I was up in Minnesota for the weekend where I grew up, and I was telling one of my best friends up, we went to high school together, telling him about what I was doing. He's like, shit. And he is in the construction industry. He's a long way from the tech. He doesn't even have social media. And he's like, I know 3 or 4 people right now in my friend group. They're all trying to figure out how to get the fuck out. They hate what's going on. They've got money. They're, 40s, they're 50s. They have money. They got retirement coming in, or they sold their businesses or whatever have you, and they want to get out. They just don't know exactly how to do it. So that also validated my original thought process, because I'm not talking to, the 18-year-old backpacker who's staying at $10 a night hostels. My audience is more the people who want to expatriate for a variety of reasons, whether it's reasons just get out of the country, whether it's to protect their assets, their cash flow, take advantage of the different tax structures, what have you. There's a huge market for that. And so when I was looking at monetizing, that was my focus. Sponsorships was it'd be kind of cute if something comes along, and that was it.
So I have a funny, interesting take on this. I call it I'm waiting to get the right name for it, but I call it the boomer business. That all of my best clients have been from the boomer era, because they have so much experience, they have so much knowledge, they have so much wisdom, but they just can't execute at a technical level online. So enters me, who understands like how to like make landing pages and offers and all this kind of shit. So like, you are a sales guy. Okay, this is how we do it. You do this business, this is how we do it. And I find like those offers with guys that are like 50 in their 50 range fucking smash it, because they already have a network, they already have a database, they already have people who can introduce you to other people. They can sell high ticket, like extremely high ticket, because people have the money and they have the authority and the influence. It's hilarious. And we actually just kind of came to this like serendipity moment, because like we look back on like all our clients and they're all older gentlemen and they're lovely people, they're amazing people, but sometimes they just can't click record, and it's nothing against them. They just didn't grow up in the era, So and I've had this because like I have a few partnerships for other businesses in our portfolio. It's a kind of complicated model, but like that individual like says it to me, he's like, the problem isn't the subject matter. The problem is like clicking on the button, that's the problem. So, and like, that's just the reality, right? Whereas you compare it to the young, dumb idiots like myself, those guys have an overconfidence, under skill problem, right? Yeah. So these guys need more imposter syndrome, right? And that's why, you get 50 fucking emails a day saying your SEO can be better for YouTube, and not one guy knows what SEO is on YouTube, right? And that's the kind of scenario that we're in, is the fact that you have guys with, okay, there's 2 sides to this. You've guys with no experience telling you how it should be, that are making money because they're selling to people who don't know anything about anything. But at the same time, those guys make it because they have that irrational optimism that they can try and make it work, because they don't know the reality of running a business and all what comes with everything. So again, it goes back to Henry Ford, like whether you think you're right or you can or you cannot, you're correct. You're correct, right? Like your belief system is correct. So that's where you have like people like Daniel Bitton, who's a nice close contact of mine, who's like 17 years old and he's made like $1 million a month, would you believe? People like Iman Gaji, who, is at that similar level. You've a lot of these guys who've paved the way for this kind of system because they just had the balls, right? They had the balls to do it. But I guess like just to make this kind of custom to your audience, because I do have a lot of experience with this, because I do work with a lot of people from that demographic. It's about de-risking your retirement. And if you want to retire in 10 years or 15 years, or if you want your kids to go to private school or to Harvard or whatever, the least risky thing you can do is to build something on the side. Because instead of watching the football or, like reading books and all that kind of shit, you could just build something from your zone of genius right now. So if you were an executive who's focused on, let's say, sales, okay, you can freelance, consult to startups and teach them how to do sales. And because that is a revenue generating gig, you can actually charge a very high premium. Because instead of hiring me or someone for like 10K a month, you can just hire like a fractional person for like 7K a month. So this person can make all profit, have 2 or 3 clients, get to 20, 30K a month, and still be in their job. Because I think the problem with the kind of older demographic is it's still billed for hours. Whereas a lot of my clients, I get them off that like stupid mentality, and I just build, and it's a retainer, okay? So you get paid for your wisdom, not for your hours. So I give an example. If I could look at your business and say, change this copy right here, this text, and as a result of that, it will, literally increase like tens of thousands of dollars every month. You didn't give a shit how long that took me. You just care about what I do. And that's why there's a great book called 10X. I think it's 10X is better than 2X. And one of the lessons from it is like the guy is looking at a whiteboard and he puts an X on the board. And he's like, this X took me 1 second to put on the board, but where to place it took me like 4 decades. And that's the methodology here, right? Is that you pay for insight. So if you are older, whether it's HR, payroll, middle office, back office, accounting, those skills are insanely valuable in a free market, and you'll get paid for the amount of outcome you deliver. And unlike being me, who was like a 24-year-old kid who was figuring shit out, you can demand such a high price for that. And that's what gives you the freedom, bro. So I think like sacrificing now for decades of freedom is like really valuable, whether you do that at 40, 50, 60, because the problems don't go away, right? You're still going to want to retire. You probably have a lot of insight in this too, but I have close family that are based in America and they're kind of like saving to retire. But the cost of inflation is going up so much that the number they had in their head has to keep increasing. So then we've been discussing like, okay, how can we get them out of America and get them somewhere that's either like, Central America or maybe Asia, they can retire. So you still need to do this. This is the thing, is that you can't not do this. It just depends on what point of leverage do you have, right? So me in my 20s, hopefully I'm building the skills to never have those problems. But if you have skills already in your 40s and 50s, you can start just doing this right now.
Yeah. And that's the thing about, you said the boomer generation's a little bit, I'm solidly Gen X. I'm not that old. Don't let the gray fool you.
I don't know the difference. I just call it boomer. It's kind of funny. It's a funny word. It's a funny word.
Is good. But the one thing about that generation, the older, they do know how to take action. They do have a lot of skills, but you're right. They still have that time for money sort of paradigm.
Yeah. Have you ever read Leaders Eat Last?
What is it?
Have you ever read Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek?
I have not. I've heard of it. I have not, but good book.
You really like it, right? So he kind of documents the history of like since the first depression, the Great Depression, the ideology basically when we went into like, the consumerism of the 50s and 60s, everyone wanted a TV and an automobile and all this kind of stuff. And they went into the element of like greed, and that led to like all the financial recessions and like what led to like an exuberance basically in society. And it's like this, it's like a mentality, it's like a philosophy basically. So the generation of the 50s and 60s are like really hard workers. So like let's say 50s, 60s, I think it's like 70s too, are like real hard workers. The guys grew up there. They know the value of like, going into the fucking warehouse or whatever it is and like putting in a 12-hour craft. Exactly. Yeah. So like if that can be realigned to something that's way higher leverage, bro, you can fucking smash it. Like you can literally build a $10 million business from that because you have the grind. Whereas my generation, the princess generation, they don't fucking have the grind, bro. You tell someone to fix a page on a landing page and they cry, So the logic here is like our guys have more access to information than ever, but a terrible implementation rate. Whereas like the older dudes don't understand the nuances, but can just bang their head off the laptop until it works. And I think like for some, I think it's just because of where I grew up, and I grew up with like very little money, and I just have like a very big scarcity mindset around that. I kind of have like that older generation, and that's why I kind of get on with older people really well. It's because like I will literally sit there and bang my head off the laptop until it works. And because I think it came from sport too, so I had a big background in sport. But it's just funny because my generation then are just like fucking snowflakes, you know, like people they flick through Canva for 2 hours a day and they're like, oh my God, I need to take a mental health week. And I'm like, fuck me, bro.
It's true. I don't get it, but I'm steadily like that. I was lucky because I grew up a little bit with tech. Yeah, and I adopted it even when I was older and I was working real estate. I made sure I stayed abreast of everything. So I've stayed with it, which is good because, I'm 52. There are a lot of guys my age who are kind of checked out on anything technology. But you're right. They will sit there and bang their head on it until it works, and they're not going to quit. They have that work ethic. So yeah, that's an interesting insight. It's good.
I love it, man. It's different generations, right? Like humans evolve, right? Like they literally actually change. So and it changes so rapidly. Changes so rapidly. I'm 28. People that are like 20s are fucking God knows what they're doing. Especially
now, like the younger generation, they're going to grow up with AI. They don't know anything else. So, there will be early adapters on that. That's going to be common stuff for them.
That's why you've more millionaires than ever that are 16 years old. Like literally, like you have a population of people that are actual millionaires that are 16. Like that actually does exist. I've met them. I know them. And like the other side of it, because there's always a counter trend, right? For every positive, there's a negative. So for everyone who's like super successful, which is, just few and far between, obviously, but I mean like the guys that are dialed into like content and all that shit, you have the other side of it, which is like the guys that consume that are like potatoes, that are bright, they're just like fried, looking at TikTok and shit. So as a result of that, they are the consumers to the creators, but the guys that create are the guys who actually smash it. And I think I was very cognizant of that too, right? I knew that if I wasn't going to be the one that's creating it, I'm going to be the one that's consuming it. And that's going to be problematic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I saw a stat the other day. I think the average phone time for especially the younger generation is like somewhere between 8 and 9 hours a day.
Crazy,
That's insane. That's because wild. Like you said, they're not creating on it, they're consuming the content.
Yeah. 100%.
And that's a dopamine release, and it's not productive. It fries your brain. But the technology, if you know how to use it,
100%,
you can leverage it so much more now than ever before in history. So good stuff, man. Well, any last words for somebody who is looking to become a digital nomad, especially if they're looking to maybe leverage the podcast to either as a vehicle for themselves or to supplement their existing business?
For sure. I think you have to learn a high income skill. There's no ways around it. You need to have one specific skill, whether it's sales, writing, marketing. That has to be your first protocol, right? I didn't have that. That's why I struggled for so long. But then when I had that, everything becomes easier. And that's your first protocol, is that you need to be having a straight skill that you can incorporate into your life and that you can leverage. Then when you have that, you need to write content around that. So if you like copy, you write copy. You write copywriting around copy. If you write sales, tell people your wins. There's a great guy, Tony Brophy, that I've been coaching for many months. He just gets on LinkedIn and just tells people how shitty he is at sales. He's like, here's all the calls I did today. I fucked them all up. And people love it. He's got like 20K in like 2 months. It's crazy. It's actually crazy.
Wow.
So you document that. He's 21 years old. And trust me, he's going to be absolutely huge. Absolutely huge. But at the same time, when you have that done, then you get known for it. So you think of Darren Lee, you think of podcasting. You get known for one specific word. And then when you have that zone and word, you can start branching out from it. You can start having products, everything that are built around this. And over time, it's kind of like a plant. You go deep and then you go out and you can start doing other stuff. You can talk about other shit as a result. That's why we've just been kind of shooting the shit on offers and stuff for the past hour. That's what gives you a really broad skill set within a certain domain. So at the end of the day, mine is all in online business. And that's where I'll be kind of positioned for the next decade. And that's a beautiful thing about playing this game, it's over and over again. It's a very detailed game, detail oriented. So it's really important that you have your content on the front end, you're learning the skills on the back end, and then you're being known for that one specific thing.
Brilliant. I think that's perfect advice, especially for the older generation.
100%.
Who have those skills already. It's just a matter of monetizing. They've already got the skills.
Yep.
So it's a matter of monetizing. But yeah, if you go through that process mentally, you will be in a very, very good position. So,
100%.
Well, where can people find you? I imagine you're pretty easy, but break us down the socials of people can link up with you, especially if you're looking getting into podcasting, or you have a podcast you want to grow. This is the guy. Hands
sure.
down, look him up online.
Just YouTube. Just Darren Lee on YouTube, and you should see everything. Right? At the end of the day, the content I've put out for so many years can help anyone build any business. You can build any business based on the content I've put out, right? So you don't need to pay for programs unless you just pay for implementation, right? So I think if you could go to YouTube, you watch a channel, you watch videos that resonate with you, people like Justin Welsh, Matt Gray, all these guys, you will have the skills to go and build whatever you want as a result from there. And that's my promise to you. If you can't, tell me and I'll make videos better. But that is the exact philosophy of everything that I've done. So it works. Put it that way.
The proof is in the pudding, and you've done it. So, I've gotten a lot out of your channel, and I haven't been subscribed for too long. But I love your format. I love the information you put out. So thank you for that. And thank you for coming on. I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you, brother. More to come, man. We got to do another one in Bali for sure. You can do one in my studio.
For sure.
In my studio.
Studio ready, because I will be in the Far East again soon. And we'll sit down and do face to face.
Legend, man. Appreciate it.